Okay, everyone, it's good to have you again. Today is session 4 of our Lead the Way Leadership Program Disc Edition. It's been a fun ride thus far. We've learned a lot about each other and our personality traits, our characteristics, the way we communicate. So it's been a real good time kind of going back and forth and talking about the different personality types, D's, I's, S's, C's. It's been really fun again. So today is when we begin our speaker series. And that's a fun part because while we've been talking a lot about, our perspective on the disc, I was able to bring in a really highly knowledgeable person in the disc and the person who got me involved with the disc years ago. So before I introduce him, again, this is the beginning of our speaker series. Next week, we'll have another speaker as well. I'll talk more about that at the end of today's session. And as we go through today, I do want to say this as well. Mr. Santana will have to be out by 2:25, 2:30. So we'll be having a solid or back and forth for about 40 minutes. And then I'll open up the floor around 2:15 for some questions. So as we go through his story and some of his ways that he looks at the disc, let's be sure to be formulating some questions. So with that said, I do want to introduce Mr. Bennett Santana to the group. Mr. Santana, this is University of Southern Indiana's trio SSS peer mentors, and they took the disc assessment, and we've been going over it the past 3.5 sessions now. So if you give us a little bit of background on yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Southern Indiana is where? What city?
Evansville.
Evansville. All right. So I'm a Hoosier. I grew up in Gary, Indiana. Give you some background. My dad was a steel worker. He worked very hard, and his one desire was to have me go to college. And so I ended up going to school not too far from you. I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, where I got a degree in business many years ago. After that, I got hired. My degree in business included computers and statistics and so forth. So I got hired as a programmer by a petroleum company that you would know of. The new one you would know of is BP. The old one was Amoco. And I started there many years ago and as a programmer. But one of the things that they had me do was recruit on college campuses. And I had a chance to bring in a number of people as, first-time hires. I was trained to interview, and then after 7 years, basically there was a recession. I got laid off, and I said to myself, well, what would I do in this laid-off situation? What would I like to do? And one of the things that I didn't like to do was I didn't want to go into programming and computers and so forth. But I really enjoyed working with people and helping people with their careers. And so what Adrian's doing is really leading off into helping folks with careers, and I've been doing that ever since. I've been in business for 28 years. We have a business that's kind of multifaceted, but it's primarily on a foundation of a staffing company. The foundational company is called Business Staffing of America. And our goal there is to target the best talent in the United States, to help develop them, and then have that person transfer their skills both ways, that the person receives skills and their skills gets transferred to the organization, bringing value for the organization and themselves. That's, so it's target, talent, and transfer. Those are our 3 T's for the company. One side of the business is called Site-by Care. So we provide physicians, dentists, nurse practitioners to the federal government and rural communities. We have approximately 26 doctors and different types working across the United States, as far as Yachts, Oregon, Darby, Montana, just kind of give you an idea. Another division, we have Internship for Diversity. And so Internship for Diversity is bringing internship opportunities to the federal government. There's a big problem. Young folks like yourself are not really attracted to government jobs. However, 45% of all federal workers will be eligible within a number of years, very short years, to retire. And so there'll be a lot of opportunities with the federal government for young people like yourself. So what we do in that division is we look for the best talent at minority serving institutions across the United States, and we bring them in. And in one case, we have the contract, we manage the contract for the U.S. Army Munition Command in Moline, Illinois, and we manage that entire program. We bring in approximately between 17, 18 different interns a year. We pay their housing, we give them rental cars, we really treat them good. They have a great opportunity, and some of the students have done remarkable things. In fact, we have one student that saved the Army $5 million in a 15-week program. He wrote an algorithm that was used to purchase an explosive that goes in a helicopter, and that had a shelf life, and they turned out they had the wrong formula and they were spending all this money. He came up with a new report saving the government $5 million. He received a commendation letter. And then he got a couple of offers. Now he's way out of our price league. he's up there now. So that gives you a little background about myself. I'm married. I have a stepson who's older. I have two daughters. They're at the University of Wisconsin. They're both studying business. One's going to be a chef after she'll go to chef school after she finishes business school, and the other, she doesn't know what she's going to do, but that's why she's going to get a business degree. You could do anything with a business degree.
Well, I think a cool part to add in is his older daughter that's in college as well is a McNair scholar. So
yes.
she's part of the Trio family as well.
Yeah, she was awarded that McNair Scholar this summer, and she's been working on a statistic class and working on defining what she wants to do her master's, which is awesome. So she's been busy, and then now she got an internship with a talent agency here in Chicago, which my wife has a nonprofit that does theater, and so Alyssa always has an interest for theater and business, so she's like now doing that internship with the talent agency. So so that kind of wraps up. I live in Niles, Illinois, just to kind of give you an idea where our business is. And just as a lead-in, is this a good time to kind of switch to talk about the disc?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so I started my business many years ago after being laid off, and I realized, well, even though I had a business degree, I also have a master's degree from DePaul in actually computer science. I realized that we're working with people. I personally, rubbed some people the wrong way. And I'm just that way. I would just rub them the wrong way. Some people I'd get along. Some people I'd rub the wrong way. I might say the wrong thing. And I sat for myself to learn about myself and to learn about others. And I hired an expensive consultant to come in. He actually doesn't live too far from my home. He actually still consults. And he was an expert in the disc theory, the disc. Now let me share with you how the disc started. It was invented by a very unique man. He actually had two wives. That's one of the uniquenesses about him. He was married to two women back in the 20s, which is, he wasn't in Utah or anything like that. He just had two wives, and he was an inventor. And what happened is one of his wives says, I feel kind of pressure, or, when you get mad at me. So he invented something that goes around your wrist that you would just fill up. He invented the blood pressure machine, right? So the next thing his wife probably says, I realize when I lie to you, something happens physically. So he puts that blood pressure machine around the person's waist and then invents the lie detector. So, all right, so he invents the lie detector, and he comes up with this theory. he probably was observing women. Back then, you know, men had certain characteristics and women had certain characteristics. And what he invented was the DISC theory, which is to look at not women or men, but to look at personality types. And he broke down those personality types into 4 areas: is driver, influence, steadiness, and cognitive. And it's really on a scale between aggressive, non-aggressive, task-oriented, and people-oriented. So if you're, say, you're task-oriented and aggressive, you're really a driver. If you're task-oriented, I mean, if you're aggressive, people-oriented, you're influence. Now, you were saying driver, you know, dominant influence. So let me just kind of tell you, drivers are bosses. Influence, the high I's, those are salespeople. S's are team builders, and C's are teachers. And he basically came up and, you know, through a lot of studies now, it's much more of a science now, most people will have 2 dominant traits. Like my trait, one of my dominant traits is driver. I'm more the driver, the boss. I don't need a pat on the back. I usually say things that are, you know, straightforward. My wife, she's driver too, you know. However, she has her secondary skill is yes. So she's a team builder, inclusive type person. Like, hey, who could describe Oprah's magazine? Oprah. You could chime in. What's on Oprah's magazine? Question to the group. I'll turn on your mic.
Okay, Sarah, go ahead. You can unmute.
Oprah's on there.
What? No, Oprah's magazine. How does it look when you go to the grocery store?
Well, I usually see other people and like what she's talking about this week and like don't stop eating bread, but that sounds like mostly Oprah to me.
Well, if you'll find a white cover, white, right, and a big O. Here's that. Oh, inclusive. So guess what Oprah is? She's steadiness. She's the S, right? Want to build the group S. Now, I don't know if you there's a building around here, Zurich. Well, I'm mixing a couple things with in terms of symbols. But let me, before I kind of describe that, there is a science related to this, related to symbols, and people are more attracted to certain symbols and a disc. So that's kind of, you'll see a logo with the triangle, like myself. It's top-down approach. There's someone who created that like that logo. Usually it's a driver, right? So a cube, you'll see architects, cognitive people, they'll put in a cube. So there's relations, visual relations to this theory that's much more deeper.
So Mr. Santana, really quick, in this group, we have, if you look in the chat box, I had everybody put their top 2 dominant traits. And you'll notice we have a high number of S's and I's.
Okay, S's and I's. Okay,
yes.
Very good. So, so let me get back to one real quick thing about this inventor of the disc. So he invented the disc. He put that out there as a theory, and it's been developed. But it's interesting that he saw a weakness. Well, back then there weren't many images of women out there, strong women. And guess what he invented? Who could take a guess? A strong, strong woman. Anybody? Somebody take a guess. Come on.
Is it the one, the I can't think of her name. But the one
Rosie the Riveter?
Yes, that's who I'm thinking of.
What's there?
It's Rosie the Riveter from World War II.
All right. Okay, that's pretty close. So, but you guys heard of Wonder Woman, right?
Of course.
Of course. That he won. He was inducted to the Marvel Hall of Fame in 1985 for creating Wonder Woman. And what does Wonder Woman have around her waist? You guys know?
A lasso.
A lasso. And what does that lasso do?
Tell us the truth.
That's right. He put the lie detector on her belt. That's kind of it. So anyway, that gives you a little bit about the inventor. So then so when I looked at myself as you know my own personality and what's working, what's not working, I realized I had to study myself. And so this person I met, we ran the disc. I ended up back then a little bit more D&I, the D and influence driver. There's a driver in cognitive. There's an I and a D. So your personalities may change just slightly, but I will tell you, you will take this test throughout your life, and it'll be fairly consistent. And so as I learned about myself, as a driver, one of the first things that a driver does is move to distrust, right? If you were meeting with me and you tapped me on my knee, I would like, whoa, what, so I have a reaction. Why? Because I moved to distrust. That's what, it's part of the trait. The other thing is, as a driver, all I want to hear is one, I don't want to hear all the steps. I just tell me 1, number 3, and 10. That's it. Now, believe me, it works on the psych care division, I'm working with doctors and nurses, and a lot of them are driver dominants. We get on the phone, I got this available, this is what we pay, what do you think about it, yes or no? Yes, and they hang up. They hang up. I don't have a problem with it. Other people may have a problem being cut so short. I don't. So on the influence side, I had to learn that my salespeople, strong influencers, I could not say, if I comment about them in a group, I would kill their self-esteem. These are things that I learned. Never give anyone any criticism in public, right? Then the S's, about getting along. You know what my problem with SS is? That I would dump so much work on them, and they would never say no. And guess what would they happen? They would quit. When they blow up and quit, walk out, So then the cognitives, they would always, hey, can you provide that in a report? Can I see the numbers? Can I see this? Can I see that? And I realized sometimes, like two days ago, I got a dentist. We don't tend to send them the details of the job. I mean, how it goes step by step. But he said, I'm not going to talk to you until you tell me the step by steps, because I got to analyze this, blah, blah, blah. And I realized, you know what? He's cognitive. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll send him the detail. And I did, because he was the kind of guy that needed to read it. So as you learn about yourself, I'd like to know, was anyone surprised with their disc? Was anyone caught off guard? I'd like to kind of hear some feedback as to, how close was the disc in their lives. So I'll let you take it from there, Adrian.
And we've gotten pretty in depth in terms of our personality traits. So yeah, I mean, Mr. Santana's here now. Was anybody surprised at where they fell in terms of what the disc said, or any of those statements? Think back to our first program when we had to bring out those statements. What were some statements that stood out to you from session 1?
I would say for me, Virginia, hi. I would say for me, it was one of the statements. It said, I mean, the letters, I was like, yeah, that's
What are you, Virginia? What letters were you?
I is my first one, and then D is my second one, but they're pretty close. Like, there's that much not equal. So, but in one thing that I found interesting was that it said that I kind of seek approval of people like my peers, and I never thought that I would, but now looking back, it is important for me for people to like me. I don't know. I don't know if that sounds stupid or not, but
No.
it is kind of important to me that people think I'm a nice person. I don't know. Yeah, that was one thing that surprised me.
Thank you, Virginia.
And you'll find I's have that personality. So so if you meet another I, you may want to give them good encouragement, because that's what you feel you need, that other I needs it too. So that's the important part about being able to recognize what your own skill set is. Eyes are their eyes. The influence. These are people. And a lot of times this has to do where you were born in your family structure. So I don't know where were you born in your family structure. and your siblings? What is
Your
where are you?
firstborn?
I am the second to last, and I have 3 brothers. So there's
Okay.
brother, me, and then brother.
Okay. So a lot of times the kids that are in the middle have to use their mouths to influence their brothers and their mother and their father, and they'll use, persuasive skills. Now, the older brother, older sister who were like born first, they were given a lot of authority. They were like, you got to take care of your brothers and sisters. And they naturally have grown to be that. Is anyone like that in this case? Who's a firstborn and a driver? Let's see. Anyone here? Firstborn? Oh, okay.
Miss
All
Norton?
right. How many?
We had a few.
We have a few?
Mhm.
All right, Hannah, what do you think about that?
Oh, well, the driver, that was my least one, but I am a firstborn. But
You are a firstborn?
yeah, I do feel like
What are your top 2, Hannah?
I have C and I were tied, and then I have S.
Your D and I was tied?
C and I.
C and I.
C. Oh, C, cognitive and influence was tied, and then an S? Okay.
What was the
and
statement that stood out to you, Hannah? What was one of the statements that stood out to you?
Once she makes the decision, she can be organized and carrying it out. I feel like I do that with like everything. Also, sometimes I don't think I can be tough-minded, but now that I look back, I can be. So I need to work on that a little bit.
So how large is your family?
I have a brother who's 14.
And then how old are you?
I'm 21.
Okay. So you're really raised like an only child then, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there are some different traits for only child. I'm talking where there's like 3 or 4 brothers and sisters, and there's like in that only child scenario. I was an only child, right? I know other only childs, they end up being more drivers. Well, I was the only child. Well, I wasn't an only child. What are you talking about? I got 6 sisters. I was, I have 5 sisters 4 or 5 sisters before me, and then 1 after me. But there was a big, great, break. So, but in any case, getting back to the question that I was asking. Anyone else?
I'm an older child, but I'm not a driver.
Mm-hmm.
What is your top 2?
Yeah.
My top 2 is S and I.
S and I.
Yeah.
And now the S is more amiable, like team builder. Do you do you feel that's a reflection of who you are?
Yeah, I feel like I work a lot better in teams. I'm not I'm an independent person, but if I'm doing something, I'd like somebody with me.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I never really realized that until after I did this, that I'm more of a team person than an independent person.
No, that's good, and that's a great revelation. So, what about any others?
Can I get somebody from staff?
Yeah, I actually had a thought. Hey, Bennett, my name's Aaron. I'm the director of the program.
Hey, Aaron. How are you?
Good. So my top 2 were I and S, and I think one of the things that stood out to me, I think that when I was reading through all the stuff for the I's really rang true for me, and I think what opened my eyes the most, there's a page in the disc called Perceptions, and so like all the self-perception things are things that I think about myself, like enthusiastic, persuasive, outgoing. I like to think of myself as being like optimistic. And maybe like even as a byproduct of that perception, I think one of the things that brought my attention to is just like others' perception, because it talks about others' perceptions from a moderate and extreme perspective, where some people can look at me, especially if they have very opposing perceptions, where at times I might be looked at as like self-promoting or unrealistic or a poor listener or overly talkative. And so I think that's really interesting because when I read through the positive traits, I was naturally like, oh yeah, these things sound true for me. And then when I went through the negative traits, or like the negative perceptions that others can have, I had to stop and think like, are these things true? Is this how I come off to other individuals? And so I think the perception side is a really good kind of self-check as a result. That I hadn't really thought about how, even though outgoing, enthusiastic on the outside, like how do others perceive that, and maybe even in a negative connotation.
No, and that's the it's like a mirror in a sense, very valuable mirror for you to kind of give you some objective feedback versus having, your boyfriend, girlfriend, or your spouse say, you know what, you're just too rude, which I have all the time. They go, Ben, you're so rude. My wife has a nonprofit. There are a lot of S's in there. So she doesn't let me go in there because I'll start directing them. Hey, pick up this garbage can, move this here. And she's like, Ben, that's not how you talk with them. So these are things you'll learn about, the negative side. So I've had to learn to like my mouth closed because that's how I am, right? I see a flashing light. I have this tendency to go direct traffic. Now, someone may not, that may not bother them, but drivers, it'll bother them. But like in your case, what happens how do you react to someone who's wants a lot of detail? That's the question I'd have to ask you. What do you, have you had a situation where someone said, give me detail, more detail, I need more detail?
I think that's part of my personality that's become adaptive, especially in this role that's much more detail oriented. And there are certain times where I am very detail oriented. But what I have found about myself is that my personality almost kind of picks and chooses the things to be detail oriented over. Like the things I'm more passionate or engaged in, I more naturally like seek out details, and the things that I am less engaged with, I am less likely to seek out the details for those things. And I'm just like, it will work itself out. It's fine.
Yeah, in my case, I've had to learn, like for instance, if I go, even though I don't like networking sessions, I've learned, I'll judge myself and I'll say, on a scale of 1 to 10, Ben, where your networking, your influence skill is going to be, I'm going to shoot for an 8. And I'll try to be that influence and change the situation. Or it depends. Like, for instance, if you're in a group with cognitive people, you want to, in a sense, kind of be cognitive with them. Or you're with drivers, don't get offended if they're like 1, 2, 3, we're going to go here, boom, it's done, kind of thing. So that's the benefit of the DISC. And I offer the DISC to my employees and my interns because I feel these are life skills. The DISC is fairly expensive to run. If you get online, it's between $75 to $150 to run an assessment. And I'll do this for free for the folks and the interns that work with me, and they'll actually go through a 3-series training, because there's tremendous benefit in learning a little bit about ourselves. Now, the DISC assessment does have those drivers. What are they called? I forget what the other quadrant about personal drivers. Those are important to see in relation to opposites, like for instance, object-oriented versus harmonious. You could look at someone's office and decide whether they're, harmonious, meaning they love to decorate, they need their things to coordinate real well, or are they just really about objective, having stuff that really functions for them? I've learned a lot about, my giving. How do I give? There's people who give out selflessly, meaning they don't even think about, they'll just give to give. I'm a giver, and I give for a reason. So I've learned, that's where you see the details in that report in the last section of what Agent provided you that will benefit.
I want to ask a question before, and I want to kind of get your feedback on something before I open up the floor to everybody. So after this question, I want to open up the floor. So let's think of some good questions from Mr. Santana. But as we get to to our group right now. This is a trio peer mentor group. So they're going to be working with each other over the next year. And, you know, we've talked about how using DISC in building collaborative and successful teams, understanding one another. But I want to talk directly to one of your very specific skill sets, Mr. Santana. I want you to talk a little bit about how utilizing and understanding DISC can help in getting a job or an internship.
Sure. So the obviously you're going to be talking with a particular person, and when you know about the skill traits, you know there's a lot of material online. You could do a lot of YouTube videos in addition to this. So the one element that you don't know is who's going to interview you. Is it going to be a driver? Is it going to be influence? Would it be a high S or a very cognitive person? And it's going to be dependent on the type of job that you get. So let's say you're going into an insurance company, actuary, data. So most likely you're going to have a driver or cognitive person interviewing you. So if you're in that accounting, give you an idea, you may want to have, some examples of work that you've done and paper format that you could show, because they're going to want to look at detail. They're going to be looking at your resume in high level detail, right? So if you're in some type of other, let's say you're in medical, right? Medical will have a lot of folks that relate with people's feelings. Like in nursing, medical is divided. There's physicians and nurses and so forth. So depending on the position, you may have a person who is really a team builder. Very, very nice. You think you'd had the greatest interview. It was went so well, and then you don't get the job because because they're just nice, just nice to be nice, right? You leave the thing knowing you feel like you got the job, but it's so you have to, in a sense, adjust to their style, right? You have to adjust, and that takes a little learning, and this is something that is not it's something that you learn over time. You'll pick up, but the most important thing is figuring out who you are yourself and what are the other personality traits. And there, in your packet, there's a quadrant that says how to speak with the other type of people. It's unfortunately they didn't really define it real well. It's done by color, so you have to see it in color, and it'll say it's your communication with a driver, it's your communication with cognitive, with a influence, and I would use that little chart to, not that when you go in the interview, you go in and do your best, but you'll learn over time and say, you know what, he was very cognitive, or you know what, he was a really driver. Those are things that you have to start observing. So
how have you used DISC to recruit and hire people? Okay,
so I have many, we divide up our business into like 7 categories. Every business that I work with gets divided up in this. Everyone who works with me knows the 7 divisions. So the first 3 relate to generation of the product. It's lead generation, lead conversion, and client fulfillment. So lead generation, finding leads, that's a lot of data. Who do you think I want in that? Let me ask you a question. Someone who's doing the data, going to the computer systems, what kind of person on the DISC would you get for that? Take a guess. Just anyone. Go ahead.
Tap it in the chat box. You can tap it in the chat box if you like.
No, I got someone give me a C. Yeah, cognitive. So in my lead generation, I have a very cognitive person, right? So the next level is really lead conversion. This, in my business, I have a side that requires with the candidate and a side that requires working with contracts and so forth. So on the side where I have contracts, what kind of person do I want in that? He has to read 200-page contracts. Tell me the letter. Who would you put in that job? He has to look at the detail, read the letters, come up with a report. Who would you put that? Someone give me a C? C. All right, I got a C right over here. Okay. Yeah, so my person there is a C. On the candidate side, I need someone who likes to talk and talk and talk and talk and just feels so good talking with people. What letter would you put to that? Let me see. I. Oh, go ahead, Veronica.
I thought it was like S.
I. You would put an influence person there. Let me ask you a question. What about my accountant? What would that person be?
Probably C.
A C. Okay. So then let me ask you about someone who's a team coordinator. Who should that person be?
An S.
S. Okay. So you see, listen, every one of you now have the ability to start whatever business you want now, because business is about building a team. And so in my case, we do pretty well for our size, and the way we do that is I create a team, I tell them we're playing basketball, we're going to go out, and we'll create a process of flow and have them, go back with each other, bouncing data, reviewing it, calling the client, and I'll write it down, and then they'll go execute it like, the Bulls. Let's go play basketball. Let's see if you could put some balls in the net. And we'll get people to work together. Now, some people do work well, some people don't. But if you pull out their best nature, right, they'll like what they're doing. And if you put a person like, for instance, I had my nephew who's an accountant. He's a CCC. I had him calling my clients. So he would pick up the phone, it would be light. The second time he picked it up, it was £1. The third time, £5. By the 30th call, he was like this. Ah! I didn't want to put that phone. He didn't want to get rejected. He didn't want to talk with people. And then I put my daughter, Alyssa, she's an I. She could call all day. She loves it. I give her a script. She reads it exactly. She loves it. So there is the type of job, I'm going to share this with you. And my personal belief is that, in a sense, you're created for a certain purpose. When you connect with that purpose, you'll be the happiest. You'll make the most money. You'll do incredible things in this world when you connect with who you are in the job that you relate to. As you all know, 80% of the people who go to college, they don't work in what they study. You know that? You go to college, you're going to become a specific this, and then you're not in that, 80%. So why? Because they may have taken a lead by someone and wanted to do something. There's nothing wrong. These industries, there are many of them growing. You could always find your particular place in a particular spot, but only if you know who you are, right? What makes you tick, what you like, what you don't like.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's what a big part of the disc is. And I think that's, when Mr. Pryor and I were talking about, developing this program for the mentors, that's exactly what we want to take away. So, thank you for sharing that. Really quickly, we do have about 15 minutes, little shorter than 15 minutes. So I do want to take some questions for Mr. Santana while he's on the phone, while he's on the line with us. So can we get a couple questions from Mr. Santana while he's on the line?
Bennett, before we get too far away from this idea that you just discussed, I think a lot of students do get really stuck on just keeping their head down in their major and doing their work and hoping that that major automatically translates to a job. And with all of your experience in staffing, I'm just curious what kind of advice you would give students to that 80% that doesn't translate automatically into a specific job. Like, what things can they be doing now, similar to the DISC, like from a self-exploration and a career exploration standpoint, to help them kind of expand their horizons and to make them like a viable candidate in the eyes of a recruiter or a future employer?
So that personally, you have to solve problems. And like, for instance, someone who's cognitive, like on the and has a propensity to get into QuickBooks, that could lead to them doing QuickBooks for a business. Let's just say that's just an example. But they love it. Here's the thing. They absolutely love it. And they make, and what I try to do is I try to determine what your skill set is. And then this is after post college, and connect you to the type of position that would make bring you the most joy. And if you look at solving people's problems, whatever it is, like I'm going to tell you something, customer service, let's say someone who's amiable, knows how people feel, there's a need for that. There's a need to understand people's issues and the dialogue with them. And that could translate to like 2,000 different jobs, right? That could translate to 2,000 different jobs. Someone who's got a very cognitive degree, that skill set all relates to other things. And in my case, I ended up with business, I ended up in computers, I ended up in interviewing. Now in my business, I told my daughter, I said, do you know what you want to do? No. I go, okay, you're going to go to school, and all I need you to do is lift weights. I want 4 years of her lifting weights, because this right here, it's a muscle. So whatever weight you lift, look, I have a master's degree in telecommunications. I know how to build a telephone company. I know everything about the internet, TCP/IP, everything. Do I use it? No. But I will tell you, from a technology standpoint, there's someone who is born computer science from one of the best schools out there. That would be above me. Then there's me, and then there's you. I'm going to say that's all. You see what I'm saying? But why is that? Why? Because I spent years lifting weights. So one of the things you got to realize is when you graduate, it's like lifting those weights. Now then, how are you going to apply and solve a problem for someone with that brain that you have? And that's the beautiful thing. The problems change every day. Problems that we had 10 years ago are no longer, we didn't have Uber, right? Think about that. Uber, changed the world. Now we got COVID. There's going to be so many opportunities to solve, and you guys are primed to solve them.
Well, didn't your business change because of different problems needed to being solved?
Yeah, it's still changing. It's evolving every day. I ended up losing everything. I started out in IT in 2008 with the thing. I ended up losing everything. I did some soul searching and realized the best thing I do is do staffing. I hire people. I know I could build trust. See, one of the issues this is another conversation about building trust and getting into an exchange conversation. But I build trust with people, and I build trust with doctors. I could build them with a nurse, and they get on the phone, and I could then work with them, and I hire them. And so I realized that I have certain, abilities myself, and I put those into play as best as I can, and I use my skills. Now, let me just kind of tell you, by growing up in Gary, Indiana, I didn't learn how to read or write. So guess what? I didn't learn how to read and write in college. I'm still not good. So I have a writer. One of the cognitive people, he writes everything. There's nothing I write. I don't write any letter. He writes all my letters. So I learned to lean on other people that have better skills. You might be a good writer. There's a company looking for you. You might be great at talking with people. Yeah, believe me, there's a company looking for you. You're good at the detail. There's someone looking for you. So, and as you learn how to solve these problems, who knows? I encourage you to start a business. I encourage everyone here to start a business. They start thinking of themselves as business owners, entrepreneurs. Best thing to do is get yourself a consultant. You're a consultant. So you get out of college, if you don't have a job, you become a consultant, and solve problems. So, in any case.
So we have another question, Mr. Santana, from Mr. Sizemore. He says, my top two currently are S and I, which are pretty spot on with my personality. In the future, when thinking about getting jobs, forming a family, future experiences, is it possible that my disc results change? Could they change drastically?
In my case, all right. So in my case, I was a D and an I and a C, right? So, and very low in the S. This was 20 years ago. I'm now, my D is up, is high like it was before 20 years ago, didn't change. My I and my S, it goes up and down depending like on the stress level. And no, my I and the C, I don't have any S. So what happens with me is that if things get really tough, I go into cognitive mode and I'm going to start researching and I want to get away. I'm going to do some research to figure out how to solve my problem and get out of it. So, you'll modify just slightly, but I haven't seen it change. You're not going to change unless some major event happens. I don't see it changing much.
Awesome.
Maybe the least one will change a little bit, but I don't see it changing much.
Okay, we have another question, Mr. Santana, from Sarah. As a future high school teacher, how can I use DISC to my advantage with my future students?
Okay, so that's a great idea. So, well, let me just this is just kind of a side note. So if I had a restaurant, my daughter is going to be moving into, after she gets her degree in business and goes to chef school, she may open up a restaurant. Whatever you do, we're thinking about the franchise concept. And one of the trainings that I thought about having for the waitresses and the waiters is that they would have DISC training. So when they approach a customer and it's a driver, they would see that there was a driver and they would react to them as a driver, right? But if they are influence or, steadiness or amiables, then they're okay to stop and talk with them and sit with them and just to chat with them. And so, and if there's someone's cognitive, then we got a little bit more detailed menu with, with more calories. So how do you relate that to students? Well, obviously you want to know what your principal is first and foremost. You want to know where he's at or she's at on the DISC. Is she a driver? Is that's why she's a principal? And so with dealing with, depending on the ages of students, you can't really tell which students are going to be cognitive or, strong influence at the young age groups. And maybe, well, in high school, I think you'd probably be better there. But what you could do is you can encourage the students to take a free DISC assessment. You'll find some sites that are free, very brief. And then you could then help them with the little career counseling. That's what I would suggest for, the person who is going into a high school situation. But I will tell you, this will help you go, with the kids that are juniors and seniors and help in the counseling mode tremendously.
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a couple more. The chat box is getting pretty, we keep going. So when you're interviewing somebody, Mr. Santana, what personality traits do you personally look for?
Well, here's the problem. If I hire myself, I'll just get myself. And that's the problem with corporate America, is that they end up hiring themselves and get all this bias, why is that everyone looks the same over here? Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is first it's important to know what job I'm recruiting for. So if I'm looking for an influence sales guy, I'm going to be looking for a high I. And I could tell because I'll turn on my high I and I'll just start talking and joking and just kind of trying to hear the person. But if I talk with a person, he can't come back. If I say a joke and he doesn't say anything back, or I know that's a cognitive, it's not going to fit in the position. So I try to match it, with the skill. That's, something that you'll get as you've already know the distinctions. You already have some distinctions about yourself. You'll be surprised how you'll be using it, So.
All right, I'm taking two more. From Jawanda, as a social worker in the near future, as a behavior specialist in the hospital, helping children with depression, anxiety, etc., what route should I go implementing the DISC styles?
Yes, okay. Children with depression, anxiety. The obviously running this on the children, it's not going to make any sense running it. But getting an idea of the parent's profile, and trying to determine, is he, a little, not that you're going to kind of put theory behind this, but trying to understand the parents. You may have parents that are drivers, parents that are, influence, and it just to kind of get that feedback with them. And you may have on the, let's say, special needs kids, you won't be able to run on this, which I think most special needs kids are like drivers, right? I have a niece. She looks at you, if you look at her wrong, she's going to take a piece of your arm. I'm like, she's a driver. So I don't know if I quite answered that real well, but that's food for thought. That's for sure.
Well, I think one of the points that you were touching on was getting to know how the parents are in the household and how they're handling the situation, which in turn funnels down to the child or to the student. And that in turn is how they react or how they communicate with the people working with them in the hospital. So I think that's more along the lines of how we want to answer your question, Jawanda, and we appreciate that. So, if it's you're dealing with depression, anxiety, things of that nature, where's, what's the surrounding? What are the X factors? What does that environment look like? And that's going to come from the parent. So, if you can know where the parent's standing, you're going to have a bit more insight into what the student or that child is going through. So I appreciate that question, Jawanda. We're going to take one more. And again, Mr. Santana, I sent out your LinkedIn profile to everybody beforehand, so they have a little bit of background on you. On your LinkedIn, this comes from Veronica. On your LinkedIn, I saw the link to the internships available with the federal government. What internships would you recommend for someone who was S&I, who was a high S and a high I, majoring in communications and health services?
Yeah, so communication, internships, get any internship you can. And that's what an internship is. It's just kind of learn, about a particular job. Now, as you learn about yourself, for instance, I met a young man not too long ago. He was an IU grad, and he was talking to me. He was clearly a high I, and he was at BMO Harris as the analyst in some section that it would analyze leases for dealerships. And I go, "What? Do you produce the reports?" He goes, "Yeah, I do produce the reports." And I go, "Is there a lot of detail analysis in there?" And he goes, "Yeah, I got it." And he goes, I hate it. And I go, "Hey, I told him, give me a job when they let you go." I told him, and he was a little surprised because this is the first time I met him. He gave me a call. I started to work with him. I ran the disc with him. I found that he was a high I. I said, "Look, you need to let that job go and find yourself more of a high I job." So he let that job go. He was unemployed for a little while. He started interviewing. I said, "Look, you need to start looking in terms of sales." He ended up getting a job as an intern, not an internship, but another company related to Cisco. And he was in customer service. He knew he was a strong eye. He could influence. But you're not going to believe this. 9 months later, they hired him into Cisco, and his salary is unbelievable. And he just met this is like the first year. He just met his numbers. Unbelievable sales. I mean, he went from like not having money to like now he could get himself like a Ferrari. Believe me, and they pay well. And that's because he kind of found out what he's good at, and he moved in what he's good at, and people love him. So that's, the internship is right now is a test area, right? There are many, you go in there, they're going to be looking at you and say, "Oh, you know what, we could use you over here." Mm-hmm. So that's why I would grab any internship you can. That's for sure. Any place, and you could see the problems that are happening. and then get a chance to work on how you could solve these problems, bring solutions, and money happens. Believe me, money will happen.
And I think to piggyback off that is, Mr. Santana speaks about taking an internship, but when you find something that you like and that interests you, you're going to figure out in terms of your communication style and your personality style what problems you can solve. So especially when it comes to internship, take what you can get. If it interests you, it interests you. If not, figure out where you fit in. So go ahead, Mr. Pryor.
Adrian, I had a quick question. And this could go to either one of you. I'm just curious if you know if this exists or not. I know that like when we do the Myers-Briggs type indicator with students, that there are like numerous resources out there that like align jobs with personality types. Do you know if there is any sort of listing out there as a resource for students or matches like disc styles with job types? Have you ever seen anything like that before? Because that would be kind of interesting to go through and see if that existed.
Have you heard of anything, Mr. Santana?
Well, the disc actually has something like Job Insight. They actually, so like for a sales job, they know that's an I. So they'll find ideal person and they'll match their disc to the incoming folks that come in. So once you get like entry-level positions, they're not going to have anything like that. Once you have some positions that are higher paying, they're going to be looking at your personality and seeing if it matches. Yeah. That's for sure.
And I think that's a great question, Mr. Pryor. I personally haven't heard. I think I know what you're talking about. You're asking about like a database that connects. I haven't seen that, but that might be a problem that needs to be solved.
And there might even be money in it.
So really quickly, before we let Mr. Santana go to his next meeting, I would like to ask you, Mr. Santana, before you head out, can you give some students some closing words of encouragement and a quick story about how you came back from being laid off and to where you're at now as we close out your session?
Sure. So I, started out in this business. My dad was a mechanic. I worked out with him in the garage, and I always felt that I always wanted to have a business on my own. And I looked at the regret concept. I said to myself, you know what? If I don't do this, I'm going to really regret it. And a lot of you folks have probably something deep down inside in your heart that relates to, you know what? If I don't do this, I'll regret it. Those are things that you have to listen to, that quiet voice that you have inside, that people call it intuition, connected to your deeper side. But for some reason, you're where you're at. I don't know, but you've gotten to where you gotten for some reason. And so coupled with that reason, with the uniqueness and how you're created with these certain traits, strong traits that were just shown in these reports, there's a problem for you to solve. And really, if it takes a lifetime, it's a well worth endeavor to try to connect how you were created, what you do well, what brings you the greatest joy, and connect with solving that issue. Some people call that career. That's when a job and your identity become one. That's really career. You'll see some people who have a career. Some doctors that have been practicing all their lives, and that's their medicine. Some salespeople, that's all they practice. This is, medical professionals. And when you combine who you are as a person with the job, that's when you get the greatest fulfillment. That's when you'll do things for free. When I found that I like to interview people, talk with people about their careers, I would do it for free. And that's the element of being able to, to really start a business. Believe me, in your case, you'll probably have 4 or 5 jobs. There's no guaranteed jobs out there unless you go to the federal government. I mean, that's a different story. You could get a job there and be there, for the rest of your life. But in corporate America, they're looking to bring you in. They're going to basically grab you the best skills, and they're going to let you go. I'm sorry, but so you're going to have 6 or 7 different positions. And so you're going to need to know how to interact with people, how to make friends with people, like Dale Carnegie, make friends and influence people. That's what your key is going to be. And if you know how to, change your personality style to another person. Know your weaknesses as it relates to your personality. You'll become a nicer person. People will like you more, and folks that are liked, they get jobs. They stay. So
Absolutely.
so that's pretty much what I want to share with you. Just continue on this journey. Read books like how to. What is this parachute? Something about this parachute. What is it?
What color is your parachute?
What color is your parachute? There's so many books that are out there that you could pick up about your own personality trait. Start building a little library. You know what comes before the mansion? They all have libraries. It's the books. The books come before the mansion. So be sure to have books that you read about yourself, or read about your own personality, books about communication, Dale Carnegie, those kind of things. Those will definitely help you along the way. And I just say, don't give up. I mean, there's a place for you. There is a special place. And if you're frustrated, look at the disc and change it. Change it. So all right. Well, I'm going to have to jump on a call.
Thank you very much. Everybody want to say bye to Mr. Santana. He's on his way out. And like I said, y'all have his LinkedIn, and make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn and stay in contact with him.
All right. You guys take care.
Thank you, Mr. Santana.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. I know that was a lot to take in. So what we're going to do right now is we'll give everybody about a 5-minute break. Go use the washroom, get some water, do what you got to do. When we come back, we'll finish our activity from last week. I have about the 2 people that you want to describe. We'll close that out. I'll talk about next week's session, and then we'll be ready to wrap up. Cool? So I have 237 on my end, so 242. Okay, so we're back, part 2 of today. So did y'all enjoy that part of the session? Yeah? A lot to be learned, right? And I think that this provides a lot of background and a different perspective in terms of DISC, right? I wanted to bring Mr. Santana in to talk very directly to workforce, business, and getting jobs and internships. And that was very much the purpose of that. I know up to this point, we've just been really focusing on the personality traits and us understanding it. But I wanted to be able to bring in Mr. Santana so he could provide perspective on the workforce and how it is applicable to jobs, internships, things of that nature. So I'm not sure if he said it, but can we all, I don't know, let's take a shot in the dark. And can you see where he stands on the DISC chart? What letter he is? Which one is that?
He's a definite D. I can tell he's a D.
What gave it away?
He seemed like he liked to be in charge. Like he liked to tell people what needs to be done and see it get done.
Mm-hmm. Good. There you go. Yeah, I mean that's pretty. It was pretty cut and dry, right? He was pretty straightforward. So I thought it was funny, and another reason I wanted to bring Bennett in was because there wasn't a ton of D's in our group, right? So there's a lot of S's, a lot of I's. We're great at building this team, but we hadn't seen somebody with a strong D personality like that yet. So so there you go. It's funny. He and I actually we parallel in a lot, but I have a lot stronger I. So my D is high, but my I is pretty high as well. So I kind of go back. I guess they would say like a driver teacher, if you will. So with that said, are we ready to get back into the swing of things?
Yeah, I actually appreciated that he used the word driver and cognitive, because those aren't the words that we had like associated with those letters, and I feel like that's another way to like drive home the overall concept of those. Like thinking of compliance as cognitive, I think makes that a little easier to understand in certain scenarios too. So that was helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and driver specifically, right, Sue? Like driver, you think dominant can sound aggressive. You think driver, you think of a leader. So I can, thank you, Mr. Pryor. All right, so we had 2 groups share last week. I'll share the screen again. We had 2 groups share last week. 1 second. There we go. So we had 2 groups share last week. Let me see who's going to kick it off. Who's going to kick things off this week?
I can go.
Awesome. Who was your partner?
I don't think she's here.
Who was it?
Oh, I can't remember her name.
All right, no worries. Go ahead.
Medea might be able to help me out. She's not here. I can't remember. I think she's only been to 1 session.
Don't worry. Go ahead. I know who your partner is. I took a picture of it. So.
Okay. So sorry.
No, you're fine.
I had a very busy week. So I wanted to ask too, because although me and my sister, who's also in this, we were in separate groups, we picked the same 2 people. Okay. So do you want me to just do one of them, or do you want me to just do one?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Do Nicole. I want to do her.
No. I want to do Nicole. Okay. I gotta go first, so I get a Pixies. Okay, so the reason why we're both arguing over our sister is because it's me and then Erica and then our older sister Nicole. And I'm dominant, but oh my God, she's so dominant. Even after this experience, I know, like, I can point her out, like, so she's very intelligent, she's very specific. She can be very impatient. And this sounds negative, but it's not. I mean, like, you know, I'm dominant as well, and sometimes some things can come off as negative, but she just likes people who get to the point. Whenever I deal with her, we've all gathered in our household that sometimes you just have to let her win. Like, you just, whatever she says is how it goes. So I just picked her because she has such a strong personality that I know that's her type, and I just can't. If you met her, you would even right off the bat, you would probably be able to tell that she's a very dominant personality. So,
can you give me an example?
We play games. We play this game. This game sounds really bad. The name of it sounds bad, but it's called Secret Hitler, and there's bad guys and there's good guys, and the objective is to, like, the bad people want to win and the good people want to win, so you have to kill off each other, and the good people don't know who's good and the bad people know who's good, so they have to work against each other. And anyway, so that's a little background on the game, but she is so dominant in the game that, like, your objective is to say me and you are playing the game. My objective would be to, like, get you to believe what I'm saying, that what I say is true. And she is so overpowering that she is very good at the game because she dominates people, and she's like, this is the truth, this is what's going on. Like, I don't know, that's the way that I can think of to describe how her personality is. She's a beautiful, great person. I feel so negative sometimes whenever I describe her personality, but.
And I get it. You're describing one portion of her personality, and you're giving examples. So yeah, that's what stood out to you, and that's how you came to your conclusion, right? I'm sure There's other examples that, you know, Erica can come up with that would still determine that she was a driver, right? So that's just the one that you use. So thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Who's next?
Can I just go next and add on to that and then say the second one?
Go ahead.
So I also thought she was dominant. She's competitive, facts-oriented, and assertive. And like Mr. Santana said, since she's the oldest, I think that is probably why she's dominant. So she's like, when she was a senior, I just entered kindergarten, so she kind of like babysat us a lot
Oh, so she's
while
much
we were in
older.
school. Yeah. She's technically our half sister, but another thing is she created her own game. So I think she likes to be a leader, and she does it a lot with one of her friends, but she is in charge and in control. So I think that also leads to being dominant.
Mm.
And then the second person I chose is my mom. I chose that she was an S because she's very supportive and she really doesn't like change,
Mm-hmm.
and she's very sensitive.
Can you give me an example?
So whenever you're talking to her sometimes, this is more on the sensitive thing or doesn't like change. If something doesn't sound like good or something that's going to negatively affect her, she kind of just like shuts down and doesn't listen.
Okay. So then how do you communicate with her?
Like my mom and Kennedy get into it all the time and then like they just like keep going at it. But for me, since I'm also an S, I just know to just like stop and don't continue, and then maybe bring it up later on and then like you say your apologies.
Awesome. So I think a good part that came out of there was not that you stop, but that you bring it up later, right? You kind of stop it right at that moment, but you don't let the situation get away.
Yeah.
You have to come back, but you have to do it on those different terms. Kennedy, I'm interested to see how you would handle that situation.
You mean like how she said that we go at it?
Yeah, and then she shuts down, right? She shuts down, she stops. So how do you communicate with her? How do you get to her?
I will be the first to admit that my personality does take over in situations like that. I'm, like Erica said, Erica's a different personality than me, so she's very good at just cutting it off and being like, okay, let's just stop and cool down. But in my dominant personality, I'm like, no, I need to say this now. Like, I need to get it out.
Okay.
And since my mom is a different personality, she doesn't want to accept the way that I deal with, just the same as I don't want to accept the way that she deals with it. So I have room to grow in that, I will admit. I feel better if I get things off my chest right then and right there, even if the person isn't willing to accept what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, so how about this? Let me rephrase that question. So knowing what you know about your personality style and about your mother's personality style, because I'm sure before you took the test or the assessment, it was just something that you and your mom would just get into, right? But now that now that you know what you know about yourself, how would you now communicate with her to get her to come back out of her shell and not shut down?
I think that I would probably need to learn more how to compromise in the situation and understand that this time right now is not the time to say what I need to say or whatever. Like, it's okay to like take a break before you keep going, just to let things settle a little bit more. So I think that's what I would do differently, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I think it's good that you recognize it. And the reason I bring that up is because Erica, that's a great person and a great scenario to give us, because your mom could easily be your colleague. Your mom could easily be your teammate, right?
Right.
Your work friend. As Mr. Pryor and the rest of the staff, they continue guys to give you projects. You're going to be in teams, and we say your mom, right? But that could easily be Veronica. Say Veronica shuts down. How are you going to handle that, Kennedy? Because at the end of the day, Mr. Pryor is still going to need that project taken care of by tomorrow at 12. All egos put aside, right? So I think that was a great example. And thank you for sharing that, Kennedy. I know I pushed a little bit, but hey, we're in session 4. You did a great job. So
that's okay. I would like to say that I would handle it differently, because that would be like my natural environment where I would argue with my mother, rather than in a work setting I want to argue with somebody as bad as I would.
Thank you for saying that too, right? Now you're understanding your natural, and then your work would have been your adapted, right? because you're not at home, you're in a work setting, so you're putting your best foot forward. So there you go. So I guess we are learning something. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Okay, cool. So thank you, Miss. I was about to say Miss Brand, but both of you. Thank you, Kennedy and Erica. Who's next?
I think Medea and Jack were in my group.
Who just talked? I'm sorry.
Erica, Medea and Jack were in my group.
Okay, cool. Jack, you ready to go?
I am.
Awesome.
So the two people I picked two friends. The first one is Nathan, who is also going to be a peer mentor. He hasn't been able to make the meetings though.
I think I've met Nathan. Mr. Pryor, has Nathan been in our previous programs?
Yeah, he's been to 2 of the Discovering Your Paths. It's Nathan Farmer.
I remember him.
Yep.
Good guy.
Okay. So him and I have been RAs for the past 2 years, and I'm actually living with him this coming fall. So when we watched the video, some things stuck out. So I said he was an S. Some of the things I wrote down about it was he likes to talk things out, make sure he has like all the points about it, doesn't have anything missing. He's very supportive and does not like to let others down. And then a big thing is he has a plan to reach his goal, and when he has that set, he knows exactly when and where and what he has to do to get that done. So that's why I said he was an S.
Can you before you move on, can you give us an example of when you've seen him do that? Any of those things?
So he's an elementary ed major. And so they have like a little, not a little, but I've seen him where like they have a report sort of due over like 5 children's books. And so he has to like read every single book, dissect it, figure out what he's going to do. And so like he has a strict schedule of, okay, Monday, I'm gonna read this one, do that one, and then move to the next one the next day. So like he plans out every single thing to do that, to get it done on the right time.
There you go. Way to identify that. Thank you, Mr. Sizemore.
The other one I picked was another friend, and I said he was an I. So the biggest things I got from the video was it was pretty much he's a big social butterfly. So when we're hanging out with groups, even if it's like 2 different groups, he can sort of bring them together and have similarities to not have them separated, but come together and all talk together. I said he's great at doing, like getting the job done, but one of the things that pointed out was they may not have all the details. It's more of they do it to get it done, and then once it's done, they're good. So unlike me, I'm an S like Nathan, and I would like to have every single detail of it. So I think that was a big thing that pointed out to him being an I. So
awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that.
We're
starting to pick up on these small things that allow us to make these big communication changes in ourselves. So I believe you said Medea, Miss Erickson was in your group?
Yes.
Yeah, I actually picked my 2 daughters. My husband and I have 2 children. They're both girls, night and day. You would never think that 2 children from the same gene pool could be completely opposites. But
what are their ages?
29 and 26.
Okay, so they're adults.
They're grown adults, yes. Everyone in our family, my husband, myself, our 2 girls, if they took the assessments, I would probably guess that they would be really high I's, as is myself. And probably my oldest daughter and myself would be, the next trait would be D's. It's quite a bit lower than our I's, but it's our next letter. And then our youngest daughter and my husband, I think their next one would be an S. So it's really interesting how my oldest daughter kind of takes after me and my youngest daughter kind of takes after my husband. But the 2 of them are night and day. My oldest daughter, although she'd probably be in a high I, her second would probably be an S. She doesn't like change at all. She doesn't handle things that have to switch unexpectedly. She's had a really difficult time during this COVID situation. And then my youngest daughter would probably be the opposite of that, where she just goes with the flow and just wants to make sure everybody's happy. She probably is just probably in a higher I than my older daughter. So I've seen it from the time they've grown up. It's been really interesting and fun to be a part of their lives.
Can you give me a specific example about one of your daughters?
One of them?
Yeah.
Well, Alyssa, my oldest daughter, I keep going by their second traits. Maybe I should go by their first, because like I said, we're all, I think, pretty much really high eyes. But Alyssa's second, well, they're both social butterflies. They want people to like them. They're both in businesses where they work with people. My oldest daughter runs her own business, and she's very, when I go to visit her, she has her whiteboard, and every day is like scheduled out, and what she has to do the next month is scheduled out, little post-its, everything's very, very organized. And my youngest daughter tends to kind of go with the flow, and it's just even in business and what they do, it's two different personalities.
Good. Yeah, I think that's a good example right there, right? You mentioned Alyssa. Whenever you go visit her, full whiteboard, every step of the way detailed, right?
Yes.
Written down, time of the day.
Yes, she absolutely hates change. Like if something, she gets very anxious. She likes things to know what's coming ahead of time. I kind of go with the flow. Just if something changes, I kind of gets me more excited. I kind of just get on top of things. My youngest daughter's kind of like that too, go with the flow. So it's just really neat to see in a family all the different dynamics and how people respond to things. But I would say my oldest daughter and I, our second trait would probably be D. It's quite a bit lower, but I think we like to be in drivers in that sense. And
so do you find yourself now more so having taken the assessment, were you able to kind of pinpoint some things a little bit more specifically and think about how you're going to shift the way you communicate with her moving forward?
With myself or with my daughter?
With your daughter.
Yeah, actually done quite a bit of that already. My master's is in leadership, so we did a lot of human development leadership. So I really got to learn about both of them and how they grew out of that. But the assessment was really neat because it kind of categorized them a little bit better. And so that made it even more clear, just some things that they work with and things that I can recognize right off the bat that I can respond to in a different way that might be able to help support that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Ms. Erickson. Appreciate it. Who's next? We have quite a few people. Go ahead.
So in my group, I had Aaron, and I can't remember who the second person was because I was cutting in and out with my internet. But I chose my mom and my sister. So my sister, I'd say my sister and my mom are both like high D's. But which one did you say has like a teaching style? Like I forgot which letter that was.
I.
So like I feel like it's kind of hard. Like I don't know if they're like all a mix of like D, S, and C, but I definitely feel like my mom has like a little bit of C, and definitely a high D because she's a nurse. So she definitely has to think critically, and anytime she's like giving me advice, she always thinks like very analytically, like especially with finances, like about school or like if I wanted to get a certain apartment, like she's always telling me like these different things to like make me really think about things that I've never like really thought about, like having to buy this and this, and everything else that goes with it. With my sister, she's definitely a high D. She's a police officer, so she also has to think critically, which is why I kind of like think she's a little bit a C, but I don't really see C as like a high thing for her. Like I know she has to do that for her job, but like overall, like I wouldn't say that that's definitely like up there in scale. I would say she's more of like the teaching influence, like with the I, because she's always like kind of been like a second mom to me. Like she would help me a lot with school. Like she's been through school, like, and so she would always like try to be a mentor in a way. Like I mean my mom would too, but she was more like influential on that because she was pretty much like our second generation college student in the family. And so I think she just like she was more refreshed about it. So she was just like really pushing that on me, like ever since middle school to now.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put what you analyzed into an example, right? Especially speaking about how your sister served as this mother figure to you, and you're able to kind of put that into the D&I, where she's been a driver in her career, but for you, she had to be a teacher, right? So, yeah, thank you. That was pretty spot on. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we have Mr. Pryor, and actually the other person in your group was Abigail Rodriguez. So which one of you wants to go next?
Well, I don't care to go. So the first person that I did is actually an instructor at South Spencer. So if anyone went to South Spencer, I know Alexi knows who I'm talking about. But I chose one of my lifelong friends. His name is Caleb. And he is a really strong S. Like when I have looked at the S's, I know a lot of people have that trait as like a secondary and somehow it was their first. But I feel like when I look at him, he almost embodies like the stereotypical steady style. Like looking into some of the key descriptors for that about like warming up before jumping into business, being just relaxed, unmoved, predictable, consistent, just generally stable. The thing that jumped out to me maybe the most, that just like rang true, like, oh yeah, this is Caleb, is the communication clue says has a poker face. So when we are having really any sort of conversation, it could be anything from politics to movies to like where we're going to go grab supper together. He will sit back with this complete poker face, taking all the information, and then is like very rarely the person to make the decision. He like wants others to make that decision because he like 100% just goes along with the flow. Like he does not care like what others are choosing, and is just kind of there to go along for the ride. And then like just to warm up to him, and talks about like tips for communication, what the study was talking about, like asking for help and allowing for reflection. And he's a very thoughtful individual. He once you have his trust, like he'll give you anything, and he like puts a lot of like deep thought into any of his responses with individuals. So to me, I feel like he really embodies the steady style.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Pryor. I appreciate that.
Yep. And then the second one, I thought this would be interesting to consider since everybody knows this person. But I chose our university president, Dr. Ronald Lashon, for the other. And so for him, he is also like a stereotypical embodiment, I think, for influencing. Like just looking at some of the descriptors for the eyes, some of the words that jump out are magnetic, enthusiastic, convincing, poised, optimistic, trusting. The fact that his preferred method of communication is like long, kind of drawn out stories and getting to know experiences. I feel like he really embodies that I style. I think it's kind of interesting to think about someone that like naturally embodies one characteristic, and then thinking about the fact that he holds a position as president of this large institution, and thinking about how he has to use like adapt to other styles as well in different settings, like when he's working with the government, when he's working to make some of the really important decisions that he has had to make, like during the COVID crisis. But it's really interesting, like when you hear about other universities and their experiences, like they're not getting the same kind of communication from their presidents and their higher ups that we are, but it's something that he values personally, that he is so willing to like share his thoughts. When a lot of the Black Lives Matters stuff happened recently, like he even put out a letter to the public about his own personal stance on that. And so he just kind of embodies that. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting, thinking about like how to apply what we're learning with the DISC with these personality traits, is there's that section on the PowerPoint you gave us that says how to influence. And so thinking about the fact that like within our program, for example, we rely on other departments to assist us in our mission, and those other places could, you know, go as far up the chain as getting the president on board to help drive our mission forward. And so it's important for us to know that like what works for him is that he's always looking for an experience. He's focused on people. He wants the individuals who are talking to him to be friendly and to like offer like funny scenarios or jokes. If you come in and it's very fact oriented and very black and white, you're not going to connect with him in the same way. Like he wants to know like the behind the scenes of a situation. And so I think that's important too, like being able to identify that style and then know how to most effectively communicate with them in a collaborative sense.
Yeah. And I think if I remember correctly, Mr. Pryor, was he one of the driving forces behind getting some of the funding for the China trip 2 years ago?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, him and a couple of the other offices. The president's office submitted a portion of that money, and the provost office submitted a
Yeah,
portion of that
I
money.
remember and they wanted to hear about the experience. They
Mhm.
wanted to hear the back end stuff, and I remember us having to go through that and him. And I think when I keynoted a year or two ago, I think I may have met him, and it was a very similar interaction. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, spot on, Mr. Price. Spot on. Thank you. Miss Rodriguez, talk to us.
Okay.
Hello, by the way.
Hi. The first one I picked was my mother, and I think she is a very, very, very high D. She exhibits all the traits. I was looking through the list, and I just pinpointed each one is very much her. She's very direct and to the point when it comes to any kind of decisions in business or just general conversation. She doesn't want a whole lot of details. The funny thing though is that she doesn't want other people to give her details, but she's very willing to give other people details to prove that she's right. One of the things I saw was high ego. That is very much her. One thing that I found interesting on the D list was she likes confidence in others, which I found that that's very true. It annoys her a lot when other people don't have confidence, when they're very timid or very mousy. That often annoys her, and she wants to make things go faster in a conversation, and it's hard for those kind of people to do that. The other person I chose was my sister, and I think she's a very high C. Mostly I think that because when it comes to the business, she handles more of like the data collection and making plans and implementing any kind of plans that mom has made. She likes to gather facts and figures. She does a lot of the accounting. She's very logic based. She likes facts. She likes to be diplomatic. I think that she might have hints of an S personality because she doesn't really like a whole lot of change. She likes things to be routine and like things to be regular. And when things change, it freaks her out a little bit. Yeah. She doesn't really like emotionally charged decisions. She prefers to be
Facts.
a logical choice. Yep. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. And I appreciate the examples as well built into the explanation. Thank you for that. Your sister definitely sounds like a C, for sure. Runs the numbers, runs the details. Your mom runs the big picture. Am I getting it? Right?
Yeah, pretty much. My sister actually used to be a lawyer, so she was very detail oriented.
Yep, there you go. Well, that sounds like a good business model for them to have, right? So, all right. So that group, thank you, Mr. Pryor, Ms. Rodriguez. Who's next? We still have a couple more people on the line. Macy and Virginia, did your group go? Okay, I have.
Yeah, we went last time.
Okay, I have Erica, Jack. Y'all went already. Aaron, you guys just went. Kennedy, Hannah, and Sarah. Did y'all go? Okay, so now we have Alexia and Va. Did you go? There you go. I'm like, yeah, Alexia or Va, whichever one.
I can go first.
Okay, thank you.
So the two people I picked my mom and my Uncle Wesley. For my mom, her highest letter was S, which wasn't, as shocking. The reason I think, or the reason I know she's an S is because she's definitely a peaceful person and supportive. She understands both sides. She tries to stay out of arguments as much as she can. I have a list of some of the things that put her on for an S. She doesn't like change. She's not very big on it. She's a calm person, and she's definitely not anywhere on the list of a D. Her secondary would have had to be a C. Mm-hmm. She has to think logically in a lot of situations, especially when it involves me. I am very much not a person who picks the right path most of the time. I usually just pick what I think is the right path, and that tends to be wrong. The second person I picked was my Uncle Wesley. The reason I picked him is because there wasn't exactly a reason. I just know him better than other people. Mm-hmm. He was high on the I list. He's a coach. He is a parent of 5. He's very involved with his kids' school. He's very out there with his community. He's persuasive. I think a lot of our family has very persuasive tendencies. He's an extroverted person. Mm-hmm. He tends to be optimistic, especially when it comes to sports, considering his team is very much a bunch of losing football players. He's very optimistic about that, thinking that he can win when he really can't. And his secondary was a D. The reason for that is my family is full of soldiers, retired soldiers, veterans, people who are still in the military. Almost all of them have been in the military at some point or mm-hmm. have been married to a soldier. And so dominance is very much one of his strong suits. He went to Iraq twice. And so he's very much a strong person. He is competitive, especially with his brother. So dominance very much falls down on his traits. I had a third person that I was going to introduce, and I think it might be a good idea to mention him. But my cousin, Alex, he's a very high D. The only reason I wanted to mention him is because when I got my DISC assessment back and was looking over it, it was exactly a copy of what I thought about my cousin. Mm-hmm. It was very much me and my cousin Alex. My cousin Alex, he is a military officer, and he's the oldest of 4. So he fell right on to the same areas that I did.
That's cool. So you guys were able to kind of chat about the assessment then and kind of see where y'all stood.
Yeah.
So I do want to say a couple things. I really, really, really like the assessment on, was it your cousin or your uncle, the second one?
My uncle.
Your uncle. That was a great, A, that was a great assessment. B, I appreciated the details that you gave after every statement to back up why you thought that. That was amazing. You told me he was a coach. He had 4 or 5 kids, right? And you're saying all this, and you're literally painting the picture for me. I'm like, okay, I feel like I can see him. Right? I feel like I can see him cheering on. And then you even mentioned that it may not even be a winning team, but part of his job was to go out there and coach them to believe that they were winners anyways, right? That's I mean, that's neither here nor there, but that's just in his personality to say, hey, we're here. And what's the I, right? They bring the team together. They collaborate more, right? So I think that was spot on. And so I think, it's awesome. And the first one was your mother, correct?
Yes.
And that was, you said a high D?
No, she's a high S.
High S. But you
Yeah,
didn't give
there's
me
not room
an
for
example
two D's
behind
in this
that.
house.
Can you give me some quick examples as to why you thought your mom, or you think your mom is a high S?
Well, my mom is a very peaceful person. She's definitely not dominant. There's not room for more than one dominant person in this house.
Okay.
The reason she's a peaceful, supportive person is because one of her kids has autism and bipolar disorder. So being controlling is not anywhere on the list of things that she can do to help them out. She has to be as peaceful and understanding and calm. And, you know, her second one was C. So that's where the logic comes in, and being very detailed, and the decisions she makes comes in. She tries not to change things in the house too much for her daughter.
Yeah.
That's just mostly, that's what came into play when she had her daughter. Before that, I had talked to her, and she used to be very high on the I and D list because she used to be a soldier. But when she had her daughter, that really all changed.
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal observation, and the reason I asked that was just because I wanted to. You gave me such great examples of your uncle that I kind of want to see what your thought process was in terms of your mother. And now that you mentioned that she has to, that's her role in the household, right? So that explains so much more. So thank you for sharing that, Alexi. I appreciate that.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Va, close us out.
Okay. Well, I also chose my mother. I know a lot of us chose our mothers. To describe my mom physically, just so that you guys can have this like image of her, she is a very petite Asian woman who I think is shorter than 5 feet actually. She's really feisty. She walks really fast and just like, you know, like really energetic, even though she's in her mid-60s. So she is a D because she is direct, frank, and super impatient. And she's also a little bit of a C. It was hard growing up with a C actually as a teenager because, you know, like teenage hormones. She's like, Va, you have a zit on your face. I'm like, Mom, I'm 15. Yes, there might be a zit on my face. So she notices all these details. So I don't know. She's also the oldest of 7 siblings. So that's
how do you communicate with her?
Well, it's really hard.
What are your tops again? What are your top numbers?
I'm an S and an I. Okay. I and S. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we speak different languages actually. She speaks Chinese mainly as her first language, and she doesn't speak English. So I always thought it was a cultural language barrier, but now I see it's also a little bit of our personality, the difference of our personality and the way that we communicate too.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that was a good example about the zit too. That was.
Sorry to be so blunt.
No, that's a great example, right? But it's just something that you're going through. But as the driver in her and being a little bit of a C, why are you not perfect?
I know. Well, yeah, she noticed it. She noticed it right away. Or like even now, she's like, "Val, you look tired." It's like, "Yes, Mom, I am very tired."
Just put it out there, right? Like we get it. Yeah. Awesome. Who's your second?
My second person, I chose my husband, who is, he's mostly an I, so really big, warm personality, really persuasive. He's also a C. He, by training, is an engineer. So that's the C part of him, but has now pivoted in his life career and is a real estate agent. So that's the I part of him.
So he had to change his communication style completely.
Yes, he deals more with people and less because he worked in material science, so less with materials and more with personalities and people now. So he's really had to really think about how he interacts with different personality types.
Awesome. Do you have an example of how you guys communicate?
I think we're both quite I's, so that's easy. But well, sometimes, so there's this, so I, like Kennedy mentioned earlier, she likes to push an issue or like confront, and make sure that we address the problem. But his personality is such where he's like, no, it's really sensitive. I don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, but you need to talk about it right now. We have to fix this. So it's good to know that I don't need to talk about it right now. I can also respect that, respect his wishes to, address it later.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm glad to know that that things are working out and that you're, both of you are able to understand that. So, yeah, and I'm just as a whole, it's been a real treat to be able to hear everybody explain and go through this process. If you've noticed, it's been culminating, right? So, to see where we started and talking about ourselves and talking about our own traits and then being able to define traits in others and hear you all give examples and really talk it out has been a real treat. It's really starting to stick, and I'm starting to realize that and starting to see it in everybody. So I do want to say today's been a really, really full day. So there's a lot for us to process. We do have a lot to do next week. So before I ask Mr. Pryor to give any closing remarks or housekeeping stuff, I'll kind of give you a heads up. So next week we have a good friend of mine. Her name is Sixia Divine. I'm picking these people strategically. And when Mr. Pryor and I were putting this program together, we decided that the last program I want to bring speakers in. Instead, I decided to do 2 sessions with 2 separate speakers because they both have a lot of information to offer you. So I want to give them a little bit more time. But we also were talking about what this group looks like. So I needed to figure out who y'all were as a group. And, I'm seeing a lot of S's, I'm seeing a lot of I's, a lot of team builders, a lot of teachers, a lot of social workers, right? So I think y'all are going to enjoy Miss Divine, as she owns her own company called Carita Smiles, which helps low-income communities in the Caribbean by building houses and providing academic support as well. But another one of her jobs is she helps businesses. She works for Google as well. So if you guys look it up, and I'll send her LinkedIn profile and all that good stuff, her bio. But if you guys look up Grow with Google, Grow with Google is a program that Google has implemented, and they go to each one of the states. And what they do is they provide resources to small businesses that Google provides, right? Google tools. And she teaches these small businesses how to use these different Google tools to help their businesses. So, we're talking about helping low-income communities, right? On one end with Carita Smiles. But then on the other end, we're talking about how she helps economic development and workforce development by providing small business resources to small businesses in each one of the states of the United States of America. So I'm excited for y'all to meet her, and I'm excited for y'all to have some questions ready for her, and that's going to be next week. We're also going to have one more activity next week that's going to close out, and it's going to be a good one, so be ready for it. Mr. Pryor, do we have any closing words, housekeeping?
I don't really have any housekeeping as much as I just wanted to thank everybody for your continued participation. I feel like we've had a really good turnout. This is the 4th out of 5 sessions, and to see a lot of the same faces through the whole thing has been really encouraging. So I really appreciate you guys continuing to come. If you guys missed the announcement, this is more just like a fun thing for you guys. If you go on our website now, there is a tab on the Student Support Services webpage where we have uploaded all of our mentor pictures. And so you guys have kind of a dedicated space on there now as well. And then the other thing is, I know that when Bennett was talking, there was kind of a combination of applicability in his words, and he was talking a lot about kind of how you can approach your own careers. But I also think through the exercise with Adrian and through some of the stuff that Bennett was talking about, that we're getting like deeper into understanding how to use this DISC assessment with communicating with others. And so just continue to like put that filter in place, especially as we're kind of wrapping things up of, as a role, as a mentor, how are you going to use the skills that you're gaining right now to help transition the students into our next academic year, especially thinking that like this next year is going to be exceptional for a lot of different reasons. And I think this year, maybe more than ever, your roles as mentors are going to be that much more valued, because the transitions are going to be so strange for so many people, and we don't know what kind of roles we're going to be stepping into. And so having a good understanding of yourself is going to make you perform that much better when you're working with others. And so just continue to think about some of these long-term applicability pieces. So, not just kind of going through the motions of this is my letter, but how do I apply this both to developing my skills now? How is this going to affect my job prospects in the future? And then as I'm interacting with others who are under my influence, how can I work the best with them with this new skill set? So just continue to have that kind of at the forefront of your mind as we're heading into the end of this. But I don't really have anything else housekeeping wise, but just wanted to again say thank you to all of you and to Adrian for continuing this conversation and this training.
Y'all are awesome. If you have any questions, reach out to staff, reach out to me. We're all here to serve as a resource. So if that's it, anybody else has anything to close out with, we can. Ms. Erickson, do you have some? Do you want to add something?
No, I just kind of wanted to add really quickly, just for you guys to know the hours and stuff that you report, that will still be coming to me, and I'll get that to Kayla until we actually are on campus, and we'll be having our structure put in place and everything. After that training, I'll be submitting all those to Kayla. So just kind of keep in mind what you're doing, what you attend. I'm keeping a record of that, but then there are some other things involved. So just kind of throw that out there for you to be keeping an eye on.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right, y'all. It's been a fun afternoon. See y'all next week.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.